Welcome to Unplugged Live with Dr. Diane Smith-Clark, PhD. Get ready to get inspired by the stories of overcoming life's challenges to bring change and transformation. Here's Dr. Diane.
Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Unplugged. I am your host, Dr. Diane Clark, and my co-host, Dr. Derek Mercer. We're so glad that you joined us tonight. Listen, we want to ask you to do something for us. Will you like and share the broadcast if you're enjoying it? And leave your comments. If you're watching it on Facebook, just leave your comments about the show. On YouTube, Instagram, subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to Diane Clark, so that we can make sure we're touching all of the media outlets. On YouTube, subscribe to Dr. Diane Clark, LinkedIn, Dr. Diane Clark. We appreciate you sharing and working with us to make this broadcast available around the world. How you doing tonight, Derek?
I'm doing good, Dr. Clark. How are you doing today? You had a good day?
I had a terrific day.
That's always good. I know that's right.
Yeah, terrific day. And I'm grateful. I have no concerns about today and expecting my tomorrow.
Yes, ma'am. That's a good nugget. That's a good nugget.
Yeah.
We thank each and every ma'am.
I didn't hear you.
No. I said I'm thankful for that. That's a good nugget. That's
Thank
a good
you.
nugget. Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Well,
ma'am.
tonight we have a very special guest. This is someone you know.
Yes.
His name is Mark Dickerson, and his business is Mark Dickerson Enterprises, Inc. And we're going to bring him on and let him introduce himself as we talk about depression, stress among our youth. Help me welcome Mark Dickerson. Hi there.
Good evening, Dr. Clark. Good evening, Dr. Mercer.
Dickerson. We ain't gonna do it.
Oh man. Thank you for having me tonight, Dr. Clark. This is an honor to be considered to have this conversation with you and Dr. Mercer.
Oh, you are welcome. I couldn't think of a better person to really speak to our audience about the depression and stress among our youth. Because we have youth committing suicide and it's not making the news because they don't want an epidemic to start. But our youth are committing suicide, and there are programs that have been developed to try to provide intervention for them so that they don't end up successful in their endeavors. And I understand that you work with the workers that work with these children. And I'd like for you to introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Yes, ma'am. Well, thanks again for having me tonight. I am honored to be here. I think that this is a much needed conversation. It's one that has kind of reared its head again since the COVID pandemic. It has become the buzzword, right? It's become the topic that everybody, every school, every country, every organization, churches, parents, this is the conversation. So I'm grateful to be in the conversation with you guys. My name is Mark Dickerson. I am a husband, I'm a father, and I pastor a church here in Jacksonville called the Amazing Life Church, which I really, really, really love pastoring this church. And I've been doing this work in the space of mental health and counseling and suicide prevention and life coaching now for about the past 10 years. And I've seen the change. I've seen how things have grown and become more of a prevalent conversation. The stigma that was there before is not really there anymore. So there's a lot of work going into having this conversation. So I'm grateful. I have an organization called Mark Dickerson Enterprises, but I consult for an organization called Hope Street. And Hope Street teaches people, systems, organizations how to see kids, right? Based on their past, based on where they come from, and what these behaviors that we see sometimes may be speaking to us.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. Derek and I were discussing as we were planning these broadcasts that we were going to cover stress and depression in the pulpit, in the pew, and among our youth. And I wanted to ask you, in working with the organizations that you do, what do you see to be the most prevalent thing going on among our youth?
Wow, that's a great question. I think there are a lot of things going on that we can kind of pinpoint, right? So to your point, there's suicide, which is astronomical amongst our youth. And to your point, it doesn't get broadcast a lot because it still has a stigma to it. But there's suicide. There are other adverse behaviors such as cutting, overeating, bullying, being bullied, right? A lot of different anger issues, right? A lot of different things that are kind of showing themselves, these behaviors. But Dr. Clark, I found out a few years ago that these things that we see, even things like suicide, right? These are really just outlying behaviors of needs that are unmet. There's one statement that we use in the TBRI, you'll hear me say that word a lot, or that acronym a lot, which means trust-based relational intervention. And there's a statement that we use all the time that really helped me wrap my brain around what I've been seeing in our youth. And that is that behavior is the language of an unmet need. All adverse behavior, that changed the game. That was what started shifting my paradigm. Behavior is the language of an unmet need. So suicide, cutting, any anger, outbursts of anger, eloping, running away, things like that, those are behaviors. But it's scientifically proven that these behaviors are linked to areas that needs that have not been met in our children. And while that sounds dire, the hope behind that is these needs can be met and these behaviors can be minimized. Some, with just in the context of healthy relationships, because most trauma happens in relationships, and then healing also happens in relationships. So some of these behaviors can be minimized in relationships, but some actually take intervention, right? Medication, therapists, and other types of interventions. So I've been really passionate about bringing that to light, that behavior is language of an unmet need, but these behaviors can be mitigated and minimized if we catch them early enough.
That is so true, Mark. It is, my heart burns for youth. I'm an advocate for youth. And I really am concerned about this generation, Gen Z, they call it. And I mean, there are a lot of principles, there are a lot of information that they're trying to manipulate their life without. And it creates a sad situation because Gen Z is a product of the millennials. And the millennials had struggles. They had pressures. And they had unmet needs that were passed on to their children. And I think it's healthy to have these type conversations so that we can make parents aware that your child is not just bad. They're not just mischievous. Seek to find out what's really happening in the child. And if you can't penetrate the real child, the real thinking behind the behavior, it's oftentimes good to go and seek counseling. Take the child to get help if you are not qualified. And parents, I'm not saying you're not qualified to be a parent. I am talking about behavioral issues and things that you see in your child going from being an A student to making D's and disinterested. That's a problem. And it needs to be addressed with more than spankings and punishment. We need to find out really what's going on. Would you say, Derek?
I totally agree with that. I think this is definitely important in the forefront of the church in conversation. Primarily, most church worship experiences even cater more to the adults than they do children. We're never really finding out how they're really doing. I think the challenge also sometimes for some parents is even though some will care, I'm not going to say that we don't have parents that don't care, but being able to provide and make the time to see what's going on. because sometimes the pressure of just trying to make a life right for the child, wanting to provide. When you have most structured homes are single parent homes, right? And you got mom who's working long hours. By the time she gets home, she's having to make dinner, or not, or the sibling is making it. She's tired because she's just trying to make sure. And I think one aspect of it is that the conversation of, because this church and mental health and what we're dealing with, we're going to have to use this word community. Community. How are we a community? Have we created a community around us for help specifically, not just for adults? We definitely need it for adults, but for children. Are our children safe? When I was growing up, everybody was your aunt and uncle. It just, you just inherited. You weren't kin at all. You just, that's Uncle Tom. You know what? And that's how you grew up. However, the other part of that, and we also know that we can deal with it. That there's some things that trust has been broken due to, because also we found out that some of the people that they were trusting as aunts and uncles, some of them end up being molested. That's some real stuff. And so, and then, but how do we build a healthy community around us so that parents even to also be aware, but also be able to provide the assistance that they need, and also coming out of the stigma that you have a demon because you acting out. No, I think Pastor Mark said it good. Pastor Mark always, he educated. So, Pastor Mark always got, he has it always polished, I ain't gonna, that's my boy. I'm gonna mess with him. But, but in all sincerity, I think what has to happen is, families don't have real conversation most of the time. If you look at most people, I was in a restaurant one particular day with my boys, and I just happened to observe the people that were around us. And as I was observing them, most of the people that were even out to eat, most of the teens weren't even having a conversation with their families. Even adults wasn't having a conversation with each other. They had their phones put up. They was playing games. They were doing things. They were just, whatever. Everybody was disconnected. And I think that's one of the things that's going to, in order to help us address or even be in a place of finding out the need, eliminating distractions and actually have real intentional conversations so they can see exactly where we are. Last thing I'll mention is Pastor Mark said it so true. He talked about, of course, we talking about this suicide. We also talking about this anger, all this stuff like that. Another thing that we need to identify with children is also low energy. If you know that your child is normally highly energetic and pushing and moving, but just abnormally tired, check on that. See what's going on. I notice you've been sleeping a whole lot lately. I know we ready to put your lazy self up. Sometimes something else is going on. And so this is important. That's what I say to that. What you say, Dr. Clark?
I totally agree, Derek, because, when we were raised with grandparents and other people involved in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And there were times when we could find solace or comfort in another family member. But now that everything is so segregated, and there are parents who are working hard to maintain community in the home, to make sure there's a structure provided for the children. But what I have observed over generations is whatever we didn't have in our generation, we try to give it to the next generation, and that might not be what they need. So when you give a person something that they don't know where to put it or how to use it, then it becomes futile. It's just something, you're working round the clock because you want your child to excel. You want them to be successful, not just living with you, but in life, period. And that is a challenge these days because, for instance, in our generation, our parents had to live without things. They had to suffer. They had to walk through processes that we wouldn't even be able to communicate, understand what they went through. So the one thing they were missing was the ability to give things. They didn't get things given to them. They didn't have a lot of props. They didn't have a lot of advantages. So they put upon my generation, they gave us too much. And so now we had an overflow. And of course, you get abuse when it's like that. And the mindset becomes, oh, I'm going to give my child freedom, because when I was growing up, I couldn't do this and I couldn't do that. And we give the freedom and we do it across the board without measuring the child's ability to relate to what you're doing and your style of parenting.
I totally agree with that. One of the things is, I will always say, since I've known my brother, Pastor Mark Dickerson, he's always been a great father. That he's an incredible father, man. He's a great guy. And a lot of times, what I wholeheartely believe as a parent, let me say this, because I'm a parent. My boys I have twin boys. They're 8 years old. They're only 8. I have only been technically parenting my own children for 8 years. I've only had that privilege for 8 years. And let me tell you, what I thought parenting was, that is not it. And what you also will identify are also unhealthy traits that you picked up from what you received as a child. Because even as parents, I know some of that are watching, you have to admit, the parent you are actually speaks to the child you were. That's the challenge. So a lot of times is, as much as I am a father, there's still a parts of me that leans on what I learned as a son. So if we're going to break certain cycles and avenues and areas of our life, here's what I believe that we are encouraged to do. Number one, understanding that some of us as parents need to forgive our parents for things that happened to us. I know we don't like to talk about this because this is important, because what happened is, if I don't forgive my parents, then I'm not going to be able to get the grace that I need to be a parent. You need that grace. You because we always, everybody's having the conversation about what everybody needs to do. So you got my generation fussing about the mama, y'all just should have just da 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 da, and then you got some of them telling you got them kids now, you don't know what to do with them, and then you got the children sitting there saying we don't know what's going on. And so if we're going to heal, first it's going to be from forgiveness, and definitely from generations being open to say that even the blessing of grandparents, that a lot of times, I remember when my son Ashton had did something, I was about to get him. Do you hear me? I was about to get him. I was about to get him. My mama looked at me. She said, "Now, Derek, don't bother him." Are you crazy? Where was this lady at when I was little? And she explained to me, because she said what it is. And so as we was having a conversation, so forth and so on, she says with you, she said that reminded me of you, da da da. She said, but it also put in my mind, you didn't get what you needed in that moment. See how that works? That balance, that conversation. God gives us wisdom, and sometimes that wisdom comes from being, again, having that relationship with parents or somebody who's wise to say, hey, and then again, like Pastor Mark said, that I totally agree with, not being afraid to get them counseling. Let me be honest with you. The pandemic did not just affect adults. It affected children. You had to pull them out of their social environment, because school is not just a learning environment, their social environment, telling them to stay home, pick your computer up, and talk to your people that way. That's hard. I know for me. What you say, Pastor Mark?
Yeah, I mean, you guys are pros. I mean, every segment you hit on words that we use in this space every day, from trauma to things being passed down to You know, even the way we parent, right? Man, everything you guys said was so positive. I think what I focus on a lot now is trauma, right? And how trauma really impacts us. It impacts 5 parts of our being. It impacts our belief, our behavior, our biology, our belief, behavior, biology, our now I'm going to draw a blank, but there are 2 more.
Yeah.
A body and one more. It'll come to me. But trauma impacts all these things. And if, first of all, we know that most of us have experienced some sort of trauma. There's a study called ACEs. ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. The study was done back in the 80s and 90s by 2 very popular doctors who linked adverse childhood experiences with adult behaviors, right?
That's good.
Poverty, sickness, all these types of things. So adverse childhood experiences. And to your point, we've all experienced some type of trauma. And if we grew up in a house where we can't even pinpoint our trauma, COVID was that trauma.
Yeah.
The pandemic was that trauma. So it put us all on the same plane. We all need therapists. We all need some sort of deprogramming and reprogramming. But I think one of the things you talked about is community. And I want to go back to culture and how we were raised and how, God bless the church, how this has challenged my theology, how this has challenged what I believe theologically, right? This new paradigm of how trauma impacts us, right? I was raised, I got my butt tore up. And it wasn't just my mom and daddy. I got community butt whooping, right? Community tail tore up. Everybody had access. Oh, you gonna cut up? Miss Johnson gonna get you because she caught you.
Yeah.
She gonna tell your grandma gonna get you because you got to get that butt tore up at grandma's house. And you get to the house out the frame. Those are things that we have made. This is going to rub against some things.
Come on.
Those are things that we have taken pride in, those cultural norms. The chastisement of our children and giving other people. But if we think about it, if we really thought about that, and I know as believers, we go back to the scripture, spare the rod, spoil the child. We go back to those adages, right? But if we really look at that, those things were meant to be corrective measures, or they should have been. I'm doing this because I love you. I want you to learn to X, Y, and Z, right? Correction is not correction if there's no new lesson taught. Correction without a lesson is called punishment.
That's good.
So if we take the route, I stopped spanking my children a long time ago, but if we take the route of spanking and corporal punishment to our children, I'm not demonizing or pathologizing anything that people still do, but if we take that route and we don't think, this was handed down to me, this is what I know to discipline my children. I've not gone into my own backpack to see if these spankings really taught me a new lesson, or they got compliance. Compliance is one thing. Learning a new lesson is something else. And science shows when our brains are in hypervigilant mode, they're offline. When we get our butts tore up, we can't learn. The part of our brain that learns is literally offline. This is called the prefrontal cortex, and this is where we learn. This is where our cognition comes in at. But once we are traumatized, and when we're beating our children or spanking our children, whether we believe it or not, it is, as much as we saying this gonna hurt you, this gonna hurt me more than hurt you. As much as we saying I'm doing it because I love you, it's trauma.
Yeah. Miss me with the love.
Miss me with the love.
Yeah. If this is love, okay.
I don't want it.
Over there. Yeah.
It's trauma. And when we traumatize our children, and when we as adults are traumatized, our brains are offline. You've heard the adage, I flip my lid, or they flip their lid, right? That's exactly what happens to the brain. This is not demons. This is not deliverance. This is a brain that is offline and cannot learn. So if we're saying we're teaching our kids a lesson as we're beating them, it's not happening. It's not happening. If we're saying that we're raising our voices and we're yelling at our children and we're hurling insults at them to teach them this is how the world's going to treat you, brains offline, nobody's learning. If we're saying that I got to do this to you so the police won't, I'll do it to you here so the police won't do it to you, brains offline, nobody's learning. It's trauma. But we only do what we know.
Right.
These things are passed down to us as cultural norms. But if we put that in the sphere of religion and Christ,
yes,
who was the biggest cultural norm breaker known? He broke all kind of cultural norms, right?
He did.
Because they looked like they were leading to the Messiah, but they were missing him with their cultural norms.
Yeah.
When we punish our children in certain ways, and again, this is not to come down or bash anybody for what they do, because when we know, we do what we know. But when we know better, we do better, or we should anyway, right? So when we do those types of things, it's re-traumatizing, and trauma is what has them possibly doing what they're doing already. And to your point, Derek, there's so many signs of trauma. There's so many signs and symptoms of mental illness in children: sleeping a lot, changing the way they dress, new friends, hiding, spending less time with the family and spending more time secluded. These are all signs and symptoms that something is going on.
Yeah.
I feel like my life's passion, my life's goal outside of preaching the gospel is educating parents, pastors, teachers about our responsibility and our ability to heal the brain.
That's so important, Pastor, because we're not really aware of our psychological system that's working within us. And if we are using an old paradigm to a new generation, chances are we are creating trauma in them because they were born for their generation. And if we really, if we're Christians and we seek the Lord, he will help you to learn your children and what they need. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people just go by, well, I know this is what my mama beat me, so I'm gonna beat you too, and then you say, but look how I turned out. I'm wacky. I needed counseling. My brain was bruised, and so it's one of those things that we're not saying parents are not doing the right thing. We're simply trying to bring awareness to areas that need change, because it's ironic that the problems and things that we're seeing in the younger generations, we didn't have that. And we didn't have all the options that they have. And we weren't given everything. We had to clean up. I mean, clean up for real. When you wash the dishes, you had to mop the floor. Everything had to be put back in place. You tell your child to go in there now and wash the dishes. They throw something on them, leave food on them sometime and say they're finished. The floor got crumbs on it. I mean, I'm just saying it's a lot of teaching that needs to go on as opposed to punishing. A lot of instruction has to come forth to our children. And if you realize there's a deficit, pastor, parents, leaders, then seek out the information. Don't just say, well, I never dealt with that. I don't know about that, because you spoke about Jesus, and that's what happened to him. There was an old system in place that was supposed to be approaching and worshiping God. And then God shows up and they reject him. Now, this is the same person they were supposed to be worshiping, and they reject him. They rejected the fact that what he was bringing was NEW. It was new. And we're on a campaign and a mission to help pastors, leaders, parents to realize time changes, situation changes, and a need for us to adopt new ways of dealing with old problems.
I think that Dr. Clark, I just think you are spot on. I think you are hitting the nail on the head. This is going to take, and I know this word was so big in the Christian movement for a long time, paradigm shift, right? It's which I understand, I get it, but it is not this floaty, deep, spooky paradigm shift that we're thinking. It is a literal mindset change that we have to undergo as adults, as caregivers, as pastors, as fathers, as mothers, grandmothers, grandfathers. Anybody who is caring for, and this is not just a child issue, this is a human issue,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So every time I say the word child, what we can do is we could insert the name of a person who we know may be dealing with something.
Of course.
If we're not brave enough, first of all, to insert our own name. That's the first thing we should insert, our own name, right? So this is a human thing, and the way the way religion separates us from our God-like character, our God-like abilities, and our God-like image and wiring. The human brain, humans are in relationship for a reason. We are healed. We're broken the most in relationships, but and Dr. Derek Mercer, you said this earlier, in safe, healthy, secure spaces and relationships, people get healed.
They get healed.
For real, beyond the miraculous, beyond the intervention of the supernatural, right? Because that happens, but then people have to learn how to live in this new space of this supernatural thing.
Right.
And so it creates, if everything is a miracle, then we live in this space of dissonance. Okay, I have now been cured of mental illness. Okay, cool. All right. Okay. Cool. But or I've had demons, I've ekbalo, or I've been freed from this demonic oppression.
Right.
That stuff rewired my brain.
Yeah.
What do I do now? Number one, to the people that I've traumatized.
Yeah.
Who cares about how this stuff got to me in the first place? I got a story.
Yeah.
Who's gonna be? And so don't just cast the demons out of me and leave me high and dry. Help me walk this out.
Yeah.
Give me some medication. Send me to somebody. Tell me. Yeah, help me out. Right. Yeah. So I just think there is a. And so I'm very passionate about this. Let me calm my voice down. I'm very passionate about
it. It's all right. It's all right, Pastor. Preach.
I think there's a reconciling that has to be done between believers and our godlike nature for real.
Yeah.
Because religion has a way of really dulling our ability to do the exceeding and abundantly, right? It has the ability of whitewashing, and everything is pray this away, everything is fast this away, everything. No, man, you have chemical imbalances. Dr. Clark, if you would have me back, I'd love to talk to you guys about the attachment theory and how our children even get this way. I'd love to talk to you about that. I'm going to shut up because
and we'd love to have you back on the show. I think we need to do a continuation of this because we really hit it hard dealing with stress and depression, because that's on the forefront of everything now. And when I thought about developing this show, nothing about mental health and depression was really forefront, but now it's all on the news. They have commercials about it, and I'm grateful to be a part of bringing awareness in our community about deficits. We certainly thank you, Mark. You are a blessing to the community, and we want to say thank you. And we'll do a continuation of this. So, because there's something I want to talk about too, and I was like, oops, we don't have enough time.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
But we're going to deal with the the attachment issue, I am aware of that. And also I want to talk about, I was traumatized as a child, but traumatized in school. And I didn't know how to communicate the trauma because I wasn't asked, was everything okay? What happened in school today? My first experience with school was my mom dropped me off at the front of the school. My dad dropped me off at the front of the school and left. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know who my teacher was. And I stood there and cried, and people passed by me like I was invisible until the librarian that was there that day, she said, "Little girl, where do you belong? What are you doing?" And I was embarrassed. Now you add feelings of abandonment and shame together. And she found out where I was supposed to go and took me to class. Well, by then I was distraught. Because I didn't understand. I knew they kept saying, "You're going to go to school. You're going to school." And I didn't know how to process that I was going to be left alone with people I didn't know. And so there's so many traumas that happen in our lives. And the problem with trauma is that it writes itself in your DNA.
The body keeps the score.
Yeah, it just keeps message after message. But we got to come back and talk about this again. Derek, as we go off the air, you want to close us out? Thanks.
No, we just thank each and every one of you. We're definitely going to have a part two. As you see, Pastor Mark Dickerson is amazing. That's my guy there. We had to have our own commercial
reunion
before we got on. But I want you to know that, please, those of you that are watching, replay this, watch it over and over again. And I also want to challenge you to have the conversation with your family. Just something as simple as, how are you doing? Something as simple as turning the TV off, eating together, not being distracted. You don't realize how much healing takes place through true intimacy. I know it's a little uncomfortable being vulnerable because you want to do your thing, right? But guess what? Don't be so busy making a living that you don't live a life. You want to have that. And that's what we want to encourage you to have. Until next time, Dr. Clark, that's it. We'll see him later, right?
We'll see you later. Part 2. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channels. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks for joining us for Unplugged Live with Dr. Diane Smith-Clark, PhD, helping to bring change and transformation in the mental health space within the church community. Dr. Diane wants to hear from you. If you have any questions, comments, guest recommendations, or program topic ideas, visit DianeUnplugged.com and click the Contact Us link. Dr. Diane also appreciates your prayers and your financial support. You can give online at DianeUnplugged.com and select Donate. If your business or ministry organization is interested in sponsoring this program, you can go to DianeUnplugged.com and click the Contact Us link. Unplugged Live is on all the social media platforms. Just search Dr. Diane Smith-Clark, follow, and subscribe. Unplugged Live with Dr. Diane Smith-Clark, PhD. Healthy mind, wealthy life.